After training my team for years, I was demoted without warning. My supervisor said, "You're just not leadership material anymore." The new manager added, "Step aside gracefully, or we'll make it ugly." I nodded and stepped back. A year later, during a critical crisis, they had no idea the consultant sent to rescue them was. It's been a year since they blindsided me in that conference room. I'll never forget the way Tom Reynolds leaned back in his chair, arms crossed like he was doing me a favor. His words still play in my head, "You're just not leadership material anymore." And Kelsey Marks, the new manager, chiming in with her fake sweet voice, "Step aside gracefully, or we'll make it ugly." I did step aside that day. I nodded, packed my stuff, and walked out of that building without a word. On the surface, I looked calm. Inside, I was burning. I had built that team from scratch. I had worked weekends, skipped family holidays, missed birthdays, all to build something solid. And they threw me away like I was nothing. Like I hadn't carried that place on my back for years. But here's the thing, I didn't just walk away quietly. I watched. I waited. I listened. I took every freelance contract I could get, learned new skills, built new connections, and got sharper. I knew that place like the back of my hand. Its weak spots, its strengths, its secrets. I knew it better than they ever could. Fast forward to last month. I got a call from a private consulting firm I'd been working with. They had a client in crisis, some mid-sized company in Portland. They were hemorrhaging money, couldn't keep talent, clients were leaving left and right. The board was panicking. I didn't even have to ask who it was. I knew. My old company. I told the consulting firm I'd take the lead on the project. Walking into that boardroom was like stepping into a time machine. Same cheap coffee smell, same ugly beige walls. But everything else was different. I was different. Tom was there, looking more stressed than I'd ever seen him, and Kelsey sat stiff in her chair, flipping through reports with her face all tight and pinched. They didn't recognize me at first. My hair was shorter, I had new glasses, I wore a tailored black suit that actually fit right. Then Tom looked up. And his face drained of color. Kelsey's eyes went wide. I smiled, just a little. "Good morning," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "Let's get started." They didn't say a word. Couldn't. They just sat there, trying to act like they weren't completely thrown. I started going through the reports. The numbers were worse than I thought. Missed deadlines, blown budgets, lawsuits, employee turnover through the roof. They'd run the place into the ground. I laid it all out, plain and clear. I pulled up emails, contracts, client feedback. I didn't sugarcoat a single thing. Tom tried to push back. "Well, you have to understand, the market has been unstable," and I cut him off. "Tom, the market didn't make you miss a major deadline on a six-figure contract. The market didn't make 5 top employees quit in the same month. That was your leadership." Kelsey didn't say much. She just sat there, flipping her pen between her fingers, eyes darting everywhere except at me. I could tell the board members were watching all this closely. They were taking notes. They weren't happy. I wasn't there to save Tom and Kelsey. I was there to save the company. And if they wanted to stay, they were going to have to answer for every mistake they made. This wasn't over. The days after that meeting were chaos. Tom tried to save face. He started calling secret meetings with his old crew, the ones who still believed he had their backs. They'd huddle in the break room, whispering like school kids. I knew they were planning something. I wasn't naive. Kelsey, though, was different. She went quiet. No more loud opinions, no more acting like she owned the place. But she wasn't dumb. I could see her watching me, like she was waiting for the right moment to make a move. The board gave me full access. I started digging deeper. Old budgets, expense reports, client emails. And that's when I found it. Kelsey had been funneling money. Small amounts at first, hidden under vague consulting fees and marketing expenses. But it added up, thousands missing over the year. I brought it up in the next meeting. Kelsey, can you explain this invoice from last quarter, $12,500 to Blue Horizon Solutions? There's no contract on file. Her face went pale. That's, for vendor support. I think Tom approved that. Tom's head snapped toward her. No, I didn't. They started going at each other, pointing fingers, talking over each other. I sat back and watched them unravel. But it wasn't just the money. The employees started coming to me, quietly, telling me things. About how Tom had berated them in meetings, how Kelsey had taken credit for their work. One woman broke down crying in my office. Said she'd been working 60-hour weeks just to keep up with Kelsey's demands, and when she finally asked for time off, Kelsey told her she was lucky to have a job. I documented every single thing. I had a file so thick it barely fit in my bag. Then one morning, I walked in and found Tom in my temporary office, going through my papers. I didn't even get mad. I just stood in the doorway and stared at him. "What are you doing, Tom?" He jumped like I'd caught him stealing. His mouth opened and closed, like he was scrambling for an excuse. I was just making sure we're all on the same page. I walked in slowly, grabbed the file out of his hands, and said, "Tom, you're not in charge anymore. If you have something to say, you can bring it up at the next meeting." He glared at me like he wanted to throw a punch. His face was red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. And I knew right then, he was going to try to take me down. But he didn't know what I had in store. This wasn't just about saving the company anymore. This was personal. I should have seen it coming. A few days after I caught Tom snooping, I got an email from HR. They wanted to meet with me regarding some concerns raised by the management team. That was their language, not the employees, not the board. Management team. Which, at that point, was just Tom and Kelsey. I walked into the HR office, and there they were. Tom, Kelsey, and Angela, the HR director, who had always been in Tom's back pocket. They tried to make it look formal, professional. But I knew what this was. It was a setup. Angela cleared her throat, looking down at some papers. "We've received some reports, Grace, about your behavior. Accusations of creating a hostile work environment, micromanaging, undermining leadership." I almost laughed. It was so pathetic. But I didn't. I kept my face neutral. "And who made these reports?" Angela glanced at Tom, then at Kelsey. Neither of them looked at me. "I see." I leaned back in the chair. "You know I have documentation, right? Emails. Logs. Records of exactly what's been going on here." Angela's face tightened. Tom's jaw clenched. Kelsey's eyes darted to the floor. That's when I knew I had them. They were desperate. They were trying to discredit me before I could bring everything to the board. I stood up. "If this is a formal complaint, I expect a full copy of the report and all supporting evidence within 24 hours. Otherwise, I'll assume this meeting never happened." I walked out. And then I made my move. That night, I sent an email directly to the board. I laid it all out, Tom's intimidation tactics, Kelsey's financial mess, the toxic culture. I attached everything. Documents. Emails. Screenshots. Testimonies from employees. I didn't hold back. I expected the board to respond quickly, but they didn't. Days passed. Silence. Meanwhile, Tom and Kelsey started turning the screws. I could feel it. They were whispering to people, twisting the story. I'd walk into a room and conversations would stop. People would glance at each other, then at me. It was like the air had shifted. Then, one morning, I walked into the office and my keycard didn't work. I stood there in the lobby, holding it in my hand, staring at the little red light blinking at me. Security approached, apologizing, saying they had orders. I wasn't shocked. I knew Tom and Kelsey were behind it. But here's the thing, I had already made backup copies of everything. Offsite. And I had an appointment with the board's legal counsel later that day. They wanted to play dirty? I could play dirty too. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The day my keycard stopped working, I knew they thought they'd won. Tom and Kelsey had made their play, cut me off, lock me out, discredit me to the board. They thought I'd go away quietly. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I didn't go home that day. I went straight to the office of Michael Wexler, the board's attorney. I handed him a flash drive and a thick file, everything I had. Financial records. Screenshots. Employee complaints. Even audio recordings from meetings where Tom threatened people and Kelsey lied about budgets. Michael sat there flipping through the evidence, his eyes getting wider with every page. When I told him about the false accusations they were throwing at me, he leaned back in his chair, let out a slow whistle, and said, "This is going to get ugly. For them." That same day, I filed a formal complaint with the State Labor Board. Retaliation. Harassment. Wrongful termination in violation of whistleblower protections. And I didn't stop there. I reached out to the local newspaper, an investigative reporter I knew, and gave her the full story. Names, details, documents. Everything. The article dropped a week later. The headline was brutal: toxic leadership, financial scandal, and retaliation, the fall of a Portland company. It hit like a bomb. Clients started pulling contracts. Vendors stopped answering calls. The board had no choice but to act. And fast. 2 days later, I got a call. The board wanted me back in the building for an emergency meeting. When I walked into that room, Tom and Kelsey were sitting there, pale, defeated, their eyes glued to the table. The board chair, an older woman named Margaret, didn't even bother with small talk. "Grace, we'd like you to step in as interim COO. Effective immediately." I just nodded, keeping my face calm. I could feel Tom's eyes on me, burning with pure hatred, but I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. He was done. Margaret turned to Tom and Kelsey next. Her voice was cold, sharp. "Effective today, you are both terminated for cause. Security is waiting outside to escort you out." Tom exploded. He jumped to his feet, shouting, "You can't do this. I built this place. This is my company." Margaret didn't flinch. "It was the company's. You mismanaged it, and you lied. You're done." Kelsey tried to argue, but no one was listening. Security came in and led them both out. Tom's face was twisted in rage, veins bulging in his neck. Kelsey was crying, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked at me once, just once, like she wanted to say something, but I stared her down, stone cold. As they walked out, employees started peeking over cubicles. People whispered, then clapped, quiet at first, then louder. They knew. Everyone knew. But the story didn't end there. Tom's firing for cause meant he lost his severance, his bonuses, and even the shares he thought he'd retire on. Kelsey? Her little consulting fees turned into a criminal case when the authorities got involved. She was indicted for fraud and embezzlement. Her name was in the news for months. Last I heard, she was facing prison time. And me? I didn't escape clean, either. I had to face the fact that I'd let that toxic culture grow under my watch, that I hadn't spoken up sooner, that I'd let fear hold me back for too long. That weight stayed with me. It made me sharper, more careful, but also more honest with myself. I stayed with the company for a while, long enough to clean house. We rebuilt the teams, fixed the culture, and made things right for the people who had been suffering. I trained the next generation of leaders, real leaders. And then, when it was time, I stepped away on my own terms. Tom and Kelsey? They were a warning. A reminder that power built on fear and lies will always crumble. And that sometimes, the best revenge is letting them destroy themselves, while you stand tall and watch it happen. I never wanted to be the villain. But if they wanted a lesson, they got it. In full. And I slept just fine.